my name is Liz Ellis, and welcome to Three Creeks Church. Here at Three Creeks, our vision is to help people find and follow God. So no matter where you're at on that spiritual journey, we're thrilled that you're here with us today. Three Creeks Community Groups. Make sure you get your canned goods to your group leader this week. In case you didn't know, we've committed to giving over 3,000 canned goods to Gahanna residents in need. One thing that I love about our church is that we're able to see a need in our city and try to meet it. Right now with the holidays coming up and with COVID, food insecurity is a huge deal, and I am just so excited to be able to try and meet this need as best as we can. So speaking of holidays, we are officially in November. I'm listening to Christmas music. I'm gonna put up my tree next week. I am so excited. Three Creeks has some big plans for Thanksgiving and Christmas, so make sure that you tune in over the next couple of weeks to see what we have planned. Now we're gonna enter into a time of giving. One of the ways that we like to worship God at Three Creeks is by giving to our local church. For me and my family, giving means so much because it's recognizing that God is the giver of all gifts and what we have belongs to Him. So we're just giving back to what He's already given to us. So here on the screen, you'll see a few different ways to give, and I want to invite you to give faithfully and generously like God has so graciously and generously given to you. If you're new to Three Creeks or tuning in for the first time in a while, right now we're in a series called Clarity. In Clarity, we've been looking at different eras of the Bible and seeing how they all fit together in one picture and how Jesus is on every page of the Bible. Here we go.
Well, hello, howdy, hola, what's up, and welcome back to Three Creeks Church. We are in week 8 of a series that we are calling Clarity here at Three Creeks Church. And man, if you've been with us the whole time, I'm excited about building upon the story that we are sharing with you. If you're just tuning in, I hope that today's message is a blessing to you. This series, I'm essentially taking this Bible, which can frankly be pretty intimidating to me and most people. And I'm trying to break it down into 12 eras and show you that this is just one big, beautiful story about a God who is on a mission to rescue us. And so today I'm going to take us from the kingdom era into something called the Exile Era. My suspicion is that as we've gone through the Clarity series so far, if you've spent any time in church, that you recognize Noah, you recognize Moses. When you hear about Joshua walking around Jericho, you're like, yeah, I know that story. But then last week, when we got into the kingdom era, and you heard about the divided kingdom and the Assyrians and the Babylonians, my guess is that you began going like, yeah, this is new for me. Like, I haven't heard all of these things yet. So today's story will kind of continue in that way. I think a lot of this will be new information for you, even if you've spent a lot of time in church. Do me a favor, real quick, if you have a Bible in your hands, just flip open to the middle. Maybe you hit Psalms or Proverbs, and then just go to the right a little bit. You're going to see Isaiah, you're going to see Jeremiah, you're going to see Daniel, Hosea, and then you're going to finally get to Matthew. Now, my guess is that if you've spent a lot of time in church or with the Bible, that you're familiar with Genesis, you're familiar with Psalms or Proverbs, and then you get into Isaiah or Jeremiah or the book of Habakkuk or Micah, and you're like, this doesn't make any sense, and so when can I get to Matthew and Luke and John and those stories that make sense again? So today, I'm going to bridge the gap. I'm going to bridge the gap between Proverbs and Matthew and show you that, basically a third of your Bible is right there, and it's the part that to me is the hardest to understand. I'm going to help you understand it today. Before we get into that, I just want to make 2 comments about something going on in our church and something going on in our world. The first is that 18 months ago, somebody joined our team at Three Creeks by the name of Aiken Kassip. Many of you know Aiken, you love Aiken. If you don't know Aiken, he's kind of been the front man of the band He does even more work behind the scenes to make the band and to make worship night, to make all those things happen. Eichen just got married, he just got a new job, and so along with those changes, he also has decided to graciously resign his position as the worship leader at Three Creeks. I just want to publicly and personally just say thank you from the bottom of my heart to Eichen for leading our church so well. One of my favorite things about Eichen is that he never wanted your attention and he never wanted your praise. If it were up to him, he would have had no stage lights on himself and he just would have wanted you to just worship God with him. And so if I ever write a book, and I don't think I ever will, one of the chapters will be titled Eichen, or as Siri calls him, Iskin. Because he's just been such a great friend to me, partner to me. The good news is he's not going anywhere. He and Steph are staying here at Three Creeks. Next time you see him around, make sure to say thank you. I implore you, church family, to say thank you to Eichen for the way he served our church. And really, maybe the greatest gift that Eichen gave to our church is the fact that he's not leaving us high and dry. He has built a great team to take the baton and keep running. So the next time that we're at a worship night or the next time we all gather together on a Sunday morning, just know that a lot of what you're seeing and being led by is the fruit, the product of Eichen's hard work and dedication to our church. So Eichen, from me to you, man, I love you. I'm so thankful for you. We celebrate you, and we're excited about what's next for you in your life. The second thing that I'd like to mention, something going on in our world, is that I've heard that there's an election coming up in a couple days. As a pastor of a local church, I feel a little weird. I feel a little caught in the middle. On one hand, I'm going, I don't think it's really my position to say something. It's not the primary message that I want my life to carry. The primary message of my life is the gospel of Jesus. Like, I want people to know God loves them. That's what I want the resounding message of my life to be. On the other hand, I know that a lot of people in our church are confused, or you're taking in a lot of information from a lot of different places. And I guess as a pastor, I'm just wondering if maybe it is my role to say something. So I've just been caught in the middle. I haven't said anything ever politically from this position. But I guess I just have one thing to say. While everyone else is saying, get out and vote, my message to you as a church family would be to get on your knees and pray before you vote. And by all means, get out and vote, but don't go vote without praying and spending time with God, asking Him to guide you, asking Him to help you to be very kind this week, that you wouldn't see this week as an excuse to be rude to somebody you disagree with. Pray that God will help you to be more Christ-like on Tuesday and Wednesday than ever before. Don't fit in, stand out, be different. I don't think that's going to happen unless you pray and ask God to guide you, to help our nation, to strengthen our leaders, whoever that may be. Ask that God will give you the grace that on Wednesday morning you will wake up and be okay. You know? So as your pastor, that's my message. I hope you didn't view that as too political, but very, very biblical. Get on your knees and pray. All right, let's get into the exile era of the Bible. Shout out to my man John Scott for taking us through the kingdom era of the Bible. John talked about how this kingdom right here, the kingdom of Israel, ends up being divided. And the northern kingdom, they're captured by the Assyrians up here. And the southern kingdom, they're taken away and captured by the Babylonians down here. While this is all happening, prophets are writing to the people of God. So in our Bibles, in between Proverbs, Song of Solomon, in between those books there in the middle, those are the poetry books, all the way till Matthew, you've got all these prophecies, these prophets that are writing, that are speaking to the people of God. I don't want you to see these as long, predictions of the future, but rather I want you to see this is what God wanted to say to these people at this time. Now, there certainly are some predictions of the future in these books, but really the most of the content in all these prophetic books is God trying to speak to these people, trying to turn them from their evil ways and back to faithfulness to God. let me show you real quick a timeline of how this all happened. John was pretty good at this last week. I'll see if I can. There we go. Come on, let's go. So let me show you a timeline, and you have a timeline on your guide, and I just want to help us fill it in. I think if I show you the timeline of how all this stuff happened, that you'll be able to fit some of these books of prophecy into some different sections, and I think it'll make more sense to you. So the first thing is right 800 right here. That is 800 BC. And then this timeline is going to go all the way to 425 BC, which means that's essentially 425 years before Jesus is going to come in the book of Matthew. And what happens is that the northern kingdom, they're coming along here, and they are captured by the Assyrians in 722. So we'll call that the northern kingdom. And then the southern kingdom, they go a little further, and they are, the siege on them starts in 607 BC. So what I'm going to share with you today is that in 537 BC, 70 years later, this is the return right here. They're going to come back in 537. They're going to get back into the promised land. But today, what I'm talking about is right here. This is the exile period of the Bible. What happens to all of God's people when they are taken captive in Babylon? What happens in these 70 years? Now, there's three major prophets. We've got Isaiah, we have Jeremiah, and we have Ezekiel. I'm not going to do this with every prophet, but I feel like I should do it with these three. Isaiah was primarily for the southern kingdom, and he was writing in this time. Jeremiah, the same thing. Lamentations, that's the next book. That's actually not a person. That's actually a book that was written by Jeremiah too, so we're just going to put him. He wrote Lamentations as they're being exiled, and then the last one, the last major prophet, is Ezekiel. I affectionately call him my boy Zeke. He also wrote during the exile period of the Bible. Then, after Ezekiel, you have the book of Daniel. Daniel's kind of a weird book in that half of it is historical and half of it is prophetical. The first, 5, 6, 7 chapters, it's the story of the exile. It's really the primary text that we take the information that we have about the exile from. And then the second half is a prophecy about the future. The second half of Daniel's pretty complicated to read, honestly, and you almost have to read it alongside the book of Revelation. We'll get into that one day, but not today. Then you've got 12 other minor prophets: Joel, Amos, Micah, Haggai, Habakkuk, all these people. And they write to some of them to the north, some of them to the south, some of them pre-exile, some of them during the exile, some of them post-exilic after the exile. But I want you to understand that all of those books, some of them 10 chapters, some of them 1 chapter, they all are prophets writing to these people in these windows of time. Honestly, every time I go and read Haggai or read Zechariah, I've got to go and remember who they're writing to and why they're writing and when they're writing. I've got to go back and refresh myself. I don't have all of them committed to memory. But it's not that hard. If you want to go and read the book of Amos, for example, you could go to a website that I love to go to. It's called gotquestions.org. It gives you an overview of the book of Amos. It'll take you 3 minutes to figure out who was Amos and when did he write to who and during which period. And I think if you read the book of Amos with that in mind, it won't be so intimidating. It won't be so complicated. If you know, for example, that Joel was written here trying to help these people not be captured by the Assyrians and the Babylonians, if you were reading it as like Joel warning them, well, then Joel's going to make more sense. I wanted you to be able to see this timeline so that you could fit different prophets into these different sections of history. One of the things that Jeremiah wrote in his book of the Bible, in chapter 25, verse 11, this entire land will become a desolate wasteland. Israel and her neighboring lands will serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. So Jeremiah warned them, and Jeremiah predicted it, that for 70 years they were going to be captured by the Babylonians. In this era, this exile era of the Bible, we're focusing on that. You see, in 607 BC, that's when the Babylonians first laid siege to Jerusalem. And over the course of about 20 years, they just kept taking more and more people over to the east to where the Babylonians lived. They captured them. They were essentially slaves in their land. Now, I am digging the whole thing where we stop the video and read the Bible for ourselves. So right now, I want you to turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 36. I could tell you this story in my words, but why would I do that when you can read it for yourself? That's kind of the whole point of the series to begin with. So 2 Chronicles chapter 36, you're starting in verse 15 and reading through verse 21 about how they were exiled. See, these prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah and others, tried to warn them. They said, you need to change. You need to stop doing evil in the eyes of the Lord. But they were unwilling to change. They were set in their ways. And things just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where the prophecy that Jeremiah wrote about, for 70 years you're going to be captives in Babylon, it happens. In 607 BC, it happens, just like Jeremiah prophesied that it would. And they're taken away as exiles. That takes us to the book of Daniel. Daniel, the first few chapters, is really one of the only historical accounts of what it was like to be in exile. Daniel, well, we're talking about Daniel and the lion's den. Daniel, he was one of the exiles that went to Babylon for all of those years. And I say that, I make that point because at the beginning of the series, I told you that I wanted you to see how the whole Bible fits together. That Noah and Moses and Joshua and David and Daniel and Jesus are all characters in one big story. This is not a wild and random collection of fables. This is one big, beautiful story. And all these characters, all these people that you've maybe heard of before, they're all related and intertwined, and they all, in their own unique way, point to our need for Jesus. In the second half of today's message, I'm going to dig into Daniel chapter 3. I'm going to tell you a story of what it was like to be in exile. But what I want you to understand about this whole era is that for 70 years, Israel did not have their land anymore. Because of their disobedience, God allowed King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon to come in and take them away. And I just got to think that as they're being taken away, they once again are wondering, God, where are you at? And what are you doing? Because you promised us, and this doesn't make sense. And as the story unfolds, you're going to find out that God, he can't be untrue to his promises. And next week, I'm going to talk about the return and how they get back. This is the exile era of the Bible. All right, let me take a few minutes and zoom in on a story that happened in this era of the Bible. I mentioned to you that Daniel is one of the exiles in Babylon. Well, there's three other, and I think you might recognize their names too: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, if you're a VeggieTales fan like me, you just refer to them as Rack, Shack, and Benny. These four individuals, they rise to prominence in Babylon because of their character. And then we see that because they love God and they will not bow down to other idols in Babylon, we see that they face a seemingly hopeless situation. What I want to do again is just as a group right now, I just want you to push pause on this video. I want you to turn to the book of Daniel. I want you to read all of chapter 3. This is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, if you have never heard that story before, I imagine that your mind is blown. Like, how did you not hear that one before? And if you've heard it even, I just imagine you're like, that is still so fun to read. Like, what an unbelievable story. Like a nation-altering decision and unflappable courage by Rack, Shack, and Benny. Like, what a bunch of studs that just in the face of death, just staring them right in the face, they go, we're not going to bow down to your gods. You know, as I read that story, there are two words that just jump off the page. Maybe they jumped off the page at you too, but I want to read you verse 17 and 18 again. I want to see if you are with me on these two words that jump off the page. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. Man, the two words that jump off the page when I read those verses are the words, even if. Even if. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they say, our God is able to save us. We believe that he will save us, but even if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow down to your gods. I don't know about you, but I'm more inclined naturally to say, what if, not even if. Like if I'm in this situation, the questions that are coming to my mind are what if we get caught not praying to this statue? If this decree gets sent out, my first thought is, what if we get caught and the king follows through on his threat and we lose our lives? What if that happens? And then even in facing Nebuchadnezzar, I'm thinking to myself, what if we say God's going to save us, but what if he doesn't? What if God doesn't come through? That's not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They have an attitude of even if, not what if. You see, in my life, when I face an anxiety-inducing situation, I just think I'm naturally more inclined to say what if rather than even if. I took a few minutes, probably 3, to just write down a bunch of what if questions that I have in my life, and I have a sneaky suspicion that a lot of these are going to resonate with you. These are a lot of the what if questions that I ask. What if this virus lasts until 2022? What if something terrible happens to my kids? What if my wife gets sick? What if I get sick? What if I'm not there to take care of my kids? What if my presentation doesn't go well? What if I get the virus? What if I give the virus to somebody else and they die? What if I don't make the sale that I've been working on? What if I lose my job? What if I lose my 401k? What if he gets elected? What if we lose our health care? What if schools are still virtual next year? What if we can't have kids? What if our car won't make it through the winter? What if we don't have enough money for rent? What if we have to replace the furnace? What if we never get enough money for a down payment on a house? What if we don't get accepted into that school? What if we don't pass the test? What if I never find the one? What if I'm single for the rest of my life? What if my kids start making really bad decisions? What if my kids get into an accident? Here's a few personal ones for me. What if we can't meet as a church in person until next summer? What if it's even longer than that? What if people leave our church? What if people leave God altogether? I made that list in 3 minutes. I could have spent 30 minutes writing down what if questions that I have and that you have. We all, to some extent, live with this what if attitude where when we face a certain situation, we immediately go to worst case scenario, and we live with this low-grade anxiety, sometimes this worry that paralyzes us and overwhelms us because we're living what-if lives rather than even-if lives. You see, you and I both know that worry, it doesn't make us any happier. It doesn't make us any healthier. If we could ditch worry, we would do it in a heartbeat, but it's not something that we can intellectually, logically ascend our way out of. The question isn't so much, should we be worried? We all agree that worry isn't something that we love about our lives. The question is, how can we drive worry out of our lives? And the answer is provided by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's incredibly simple, but yet very profound. And if we did it, it would change all of our lives. The objective is to replace what ifs in our lives with even ifs. A real faith in a real God empowers you. It gives you this deep sense of peace that you can replace all the what ifs in your life with even if it happens. God's still good. He's still on the throne. He still has a plan. It's still better than mine, and he still loves me. Now, that's a bold goal. That is a lofty and bold goal, to take all of the what ifs in our life and just blanket cover them over and say, we're changing them all to even ifs. We're going to trust God no matter what, that he's on the throne. I mean, when you talk about, our jobs or the virus, I think some of us can get around to saying, even if, like we can rally the troops and we'll be okay. But you start talking about my kids or my family, and it just got even more real. Like, does my trust, does my faith in God, is it so real that anything could happen and I could say, even if? That's a pretty deep question, and one that even if you've been following Jesus for a long time, you should consider. Is there anything that you couldn't say, even if? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they said even if in the face of the most anxiety-inducing situation that they possibly could have imagined. And that kind of confidence, listen to me, that kind of confidence can only come from knowing that God is. That God is all-powerful. That he is in control, that he is on the throne in heaven, that he does have a plan, and maybe even most importantly right now, that God is present with us in our suffering, demonstrating it for us when he died on the cross for us. God is. And because God is, if we have a deep, deep-rooted faith in that statement that God is those things, well, then we can have a deep, enduring peace. The question for you is, do you believe that God is those things? Do you believe in God? And maybe another way to ask that question is, do you have peace? Do you have a deep peace that what ifs can transform into even ifs? And if that's not the case for you, if that seems impossible for you, if you don't know how to have that at all, then I would just question, maybe start off by going, do I really know God? Do I have a real and personal deep faith in him? He holds the whole world in his hands. One of my favorite people in the world, one of my best friends, many of you know him, his name is Mark Artrip. And Mark, last week in his message to Movement Church, said something that I think needs repeated right here. He said that worry is the trigger to start praying. That worry is the trigger to start praying. All these what ifs, it's just another way to say that we're worried about something. It's the trigger to start praying. I don't know about you, but it's going to be impossible for me to go take this message and take all the things I'm worried about and just change them. Even if now. That's not going to happen. The only way that's going to happen for me is if I pray and ask God to transform my heart, to believe him more than I ever have before, giving me the confidence in who God is that I can actually change them all to even ifs. So I'm asking you, church, that if you have this feeling of what if, fill in the blank, if that begins to come up in your heart, to come up in your mind this week, let that be the trigger to start praying and saying, God, would you help me replace it with even if? Help me in my unbelief. That's a pretty good prayer right there. Church, I'm asking you, let's drive worry out of our lives by replacing all of the what ifs in our life with even if. God is able, we believe that he will, but even if he doesn't, no matter what happens, it's not as though he was juggling the world and lost control of it. He sits on the throne in heaven. He holds the whole world in his hands. Because I believe that in my heart, I can have a deep peace about it. Three Creeks, I love you. We'll see you next week for the return era of the Bible. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I know for me that was so good to hear. My husband and I just bought a new house and we're thinking about all of these things and what if we don't have water? What if all of these things break? And it's so good to know that even if all of that happens, God is still good. He's still on the throne. He's for me, He's with me, and His strength will sustain me. If you have any questions about this sermon this week, make sure you submit them for the Q&A podcast. Those are released every Friday. Have a good week. See you soon.